Let's be brutally honest, the Marvel Legends action figure that we all desperately need in our lives right now is this guy. Yes, we need emo Tobey Maguire to really spice up our boring ass displays. And I know some people say that they like this version of Tobey or they're okay with it. I love it. It kind of like perfectly encapsulates that little time frame in your life where you kind of act like this. I would just like to say that I desperately miss when Tobey Maguire was Spider-Man. But all jokes aside, today's a dead serious video. This is a life or death situation. I'm totally kidding, by the way. None of that is true, but honestly, I wanted to talk about this for quite some time. But you know, life gets busy and I just haven't really had an opportunity to talk about this. But I really wanted to jump into this into the Spider-Verse Marvel Legends wave that got released a few years ago. Now, this is definitely not a full-on review, but in my personal take, this is one of the best Spider-Man movies out there, whether it's live action or animated, it doesn't matter. This might be like my second or third favorite, right behind Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, which will forever be my all-time favorite Spider-Man movie. But Into the Spider-Verse definitely gave this movie a run for its money because it was just so perfectly cast, great voice acting, great story. I love the visual aesthetics of the entire film. It wasn't technically comic book accurate, but as I said, I just enjoyed the heck out of this movie. Like I said, not really an official review or anything like that, but just my personal take on the movie. Having said that, when the wave first got announced, I was a little bit skeptical, and everything that I was afraid of really came to fruition with this particular wave. Obviously, you got the entire core here. You had Gwen, Miles, Peter, and then Prowler, but they threw in, I believe, like 3 different figures that had nothing to do with the animated film. You had, for example, the Build-A-Figure as Stiltman. I could care less about this character. I know there were people out there that were jizzing themselves and getting hard nips. That was definitely not me. I'd heard a little bit about him and maybe read a comic book series that featured him here and there, but I really had no respect for him as a villain, and I even had less respect for him as an action figure. It just didn't resonate with me. I ended up trading him like a few months after I purchased him. And then they had this ridiculous character named Frogman. Look, if there are hardcore fans out there, I'm sorry if I insult you, but there's nothing to really strike fear into the hearts of villains. It's just a dude dressed up in a green suit. He was probably able to stop villains more consistently because they would spend the entire time pointing at laughing at him. I will give credit where credit is due. The idea of having the hand ninjas include the Stiltman legs was actually pretty genius because the hand ninjas are essentially a Build-A-Figure wave, or I should say it was a Build-A-Figure figure in this wave. And so if you were really interested in fleshing out your hand army, you could pick up multiples of these. So it was pretty smart if you wanted your Stiltman to be really tall and high. I don't know why you would want to do that, but you could always just pick up extra hand ninjas, and then those Build-A-Figure pieces wouldn't just be leftovers, which is usually what Hasbro tends to do with a lot of their army builders. If I'm not mistaken, these figures were eventually re-released in like a different color palette, and you could army build with them, but the price point just didn't make any sense. If I'm not mistaken, they were just being sold for like under $20 or around 20s, and it really didn't make any sense because now it wasn't a part of any Build-A-Figure wave, whereas in the Into the Spider-Verse did have that extra plastic from the Build-A-Figure. Regardless, it was, to me at least in that perspective, an absolute failure on Hasbro's part. And I know there are going to be a lot of people out there that are big giant Hasbro fans that are going to say, well, that's a pretty consistent thing. That's the norm from Hasbro. And you're right. I mean, I've been collecting Marvel Legends now for a few years, and I'm very familiar with the formula by now, but it really made no sense to me, especially considering they only decided to release 4 figures, or essentially I think they would add Spider-Man Noir as a Target exclusive, which I think like 2 people on planet Earth were able to acquire because this thing just sold out incredibly quickly and was going for like up to 3 times retail online. So I wasn't able to acquire that figure, but they were able to flesh it out just a little bit more. And then obviously we got the Across the Spider-Verse retro carded Marvel Legends wave not too long ago, but that's a completely different storyline. And honestly, there were just a plethora of different characters that you could include for that wave. But I'm only talking about Into the Spider-Verse. I think it was a huge missed opportunity. Now, honestly, I don't know the legal situation. I'm sure that there's some sort of loophole that, you know, maybe Sony or Disney or Hasbro or anybody involved has to jump through to make these figures. But I think it should have happened. I know that Sony and Disney have had their differences, but if you were going to make a wave or a few figures featuring characters from Into the Spider-Verse, I feel like it's a well that you can go into time and time again. You do have the core characters, but even they could have used alternate looks. We did have Miles Morales, for example, have the final version of the suit in the film. That could have been an action figure. We could have easily seen some of the villains for the film as well. We have Kingpin, for example, and obviously a lot of these would use brand new body sculpting. I don't know if they necessarily, I know that they have a Kingpin body mold already, but I don't know if that would necessarily fit in with the aesthetic of the Into the Spider-Verse universe. But you also had, for example, Tombstone, you had Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Penny Parker. You could even have another version of Miles Morales when he decides to visit Peter Parker's gravesite. And I know there were other OMs that took on this license, and they did give us some of these figures, at least in their own versions. But unfortunately, those figures don't always fit in with the aesthetic or the stylings of Marvel Legends from Hasbro. Sometimes they tend to be a little bit too thin or a little bit too small. They're truer to like the 1/12 scale, whereas in Marvel Legends tend to run a little bit bigger. And in some cases, you might even be able to get away with just re-releasing some of the original 4 figures from Into the Spider-Verse, but just port them into like some retro carded packaging, something simplistic like that, considering some of these figures and through the third-party marketplace have already gone up to almost $100. I think last time I checked, the Miles Morales was going for roughly about 80 something, and I think Gwen and the rest of the figures from that particular wave kind of a little bit cheaper, but still around that like $40 to $60 range. So it wouldn't necessarily hurt Hasbro to re-release these, give newer collectors an opportunity to pick them up. But as I said previously, I just don't understand why Hasbro doesn't try to squeeze the most out of this particular franchise. There's still quite a bit of merchandising. There are so many figures. There's just too much of an opportunity for them to just pass up. I still feel like they should eventually revisit this particular universe and continue giving us more phenomenal figures to add to our display. Now, I mentioned this previously. This is just my personal take, my personal perspective. This is just kind of me spitballing, wondering out loud why exactly things played out the way that they did. But if you have more information than I do, because clearly I don't, let me know down below in the comment section. If you guys enjoy this type of content, you guys can always subscribe, stay up to date with all of the new content coming at you guys. Let me know what particular figure from this universe you would like to own in your display. There is definitely quite a bit to choose from. Let me know down below. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. There's a bunch of stuff that we plan on doing soon. I want to try doing different things, maybe new top 5 lists coming at you guys. But that's all in the foreseeable future. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Stay safe out there. Make sure to always enjoy the hobby. And I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you.